Hello, this is Steve Kaloper. Thank you so much for being a part of this journey and this adventure into doing good better. I believe that you're going to very much enjoy this conversation today with a dear friend, a ministry leader that's been on the front lines for over 25 years. He's a great guy, and I believe fully that you're going to enjoy this conversation with John Heerema, founder of Big Life. So thank you so much and enjoy. Hi, I'm certainly excited that you joined this conversation with a dear friend and a partner in missions. John, you and I have been running together for a while. I just feel like we've been running together for so long, we should be in better shape, but I'm grateful for you. And for this conversation, it's about Big Life and the mission of Big Life and the discipleship making movement, and that we can recognize and realize a healthy body of believers everywhere. And in the term that I'd love to describe Big Life, which is strategically organic. The strategy is we want everyone to know the gospel. We want everyone to have a relationship with Christ, but it's organic through relationships. And I know that that's your heart as well. But in addition to hearing from you about Big Life, I want to dive into and go a little deeper to inspire listeners to your story, the struggles, the challenges that you and Kathy might have gone through as you were praying about this journey and this mission, and the ups and downs, and the faithfulness that I know that you've demonstrated to the leadership team, to me, as you're out on the front line. So, John, welcome to the Doing Good Better podcast today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Steve. It's great to be here.
Well, John, start out with 26 years ago. Tell us a little bit about the story, just to set the stage and the mission of Big Life. But 26 years ago, we're hearing in the news all the time now, every day, Iran. And there is certainly Iran. It's a part of your story and your mission, but it's also the Persian people. Give us a sense of, one, the mission of Big Life, and then take us back 26 years ago to when you were challenged and really encouraged to get out into the missions field to experience what it means to share a relationship with Christ with others.
Yeah, for Kathy and I, we were living the dream. We thought we had the perfect life. Life was amazing. Business was incredible, and we had a 2-year-old daughter, and Kathy was pregnant with our son, and we couldn't imagine life being any better. And I made the mistake of saying those fatal words like, we have the perfect life. And within days, the Lord kind of shook us up, making us realize that we were perfectly shallow. It was all about us. But I was challenged to read a book, and the book was all about the 1040 window, North Africa, Middle East, South and Central Asia. And I was reading it one night by 11 o'clock at night, and it said 2/3 of the world's population, 97% of the least evangelized people in the world, less than 5% of missions work, less than 2% of missions dollars. And as a businessman, that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. And then it said, every time your heart beats, someone dies in that part of the world without ever hearing the name Jesus Christ one time. And for the first time in my life, that broke my heart. And I had no idea what that meant. Kathy and I thought we'd just be praying more and maybe writing some checks. And I was challenged to lead a prayer walking trip to Turkey to pray for the people of Iran. I said, that's crazy. Let's go to Iran. Everybody said, you can't. And we did some research, and we found out that Iran was actually trying to put together an Olympic baseball team. And I had an accountability partner and myself who had both played some baseball. So and then we had another accountability partner who just had a real heart for lost people as well. And so we faxed the Iranian Olympic Committee back in 2000 and volunteered to be the Olympic baseball coaches, and they were desperate. And they said yes. And within days, we were getting our passports and visas and arriving in Tehran. And that was the very beginning of the story.
So John, you literally, John, had to get a passport because you'd never been out of the country before.
I had never been out of the country. I don't think any of us had been. Well, the one guy had been to the Caribbean a couple times, something like that, but none of us had ever been over to the Middle East or Central Asia. And, just phenomenal experience. The Persian people are so wonderful. I mean, I do believe they are the hungriest people in the world. They remember what life was like before the Ayatollah took over back in 1979. They realized 47 years later, it's not the answer. And they're searching for truth. And, opportunity after opportunity to bring people truth about Jesus and and a life walking with Jesus, and they are hungry for that. And there's so many Iranians now who are, experiencing what it means to have a relationship with Jesus. They, the Iranian underground church is definitely the healthiest underground church in the world. There's claims back and forth that talk about, is it faster growing than China, or is China's underground movement faster? I don't have the answer to that. All I know is that Iran's is reproducing and it's healthy, and people are running Jesus. And that was the birth of Big Life. And, we exist to empower believers worldwide to reach and disciple their own people for Jesus. Now it's grown to 180 some countries. So.
Which is incredible. There's still a few more countries to go.
A few.
John, let's go back to you and Kathy. As you described, you were living what you would say is the perfect life. You had a landscape business. You were serving golf courses and country clubs. Life seemed to be comfortable. This was 26, 27 years ago. What was the process conversationally that you and Kathy were going through when you said, one, I've been encouraged to go into the missions field, and second of all, hey, Kathy, by the way, I'm going to Tehran. What was that conversation like with you and Kathy, if you could reflect back on?
I think it'd be like every conversation you have, everybody has, right? It was interesting because I think we never really thought we'd get approved to go to Tehran. It was kind of like one of those things that you do and you say it, you talk about because you think everybody's going to think it's cool, but there's no chance it's ever going to happen. And then we had to come to the realization it was happening. And Kathy was, really, really supportive. She never had an issue with us going to Iran early on. In fact, she's the one that kept on saying all the time, hey, as long as you're in, the Lord's will, you're safer there than you are walking through the grocery store parking lot here being disobedient. So we kind of bought that and ran with that mantra, and that's been our, grounding ever since then. We go to a lot of difficult places, but as long as we feel like the Lord's calling us there, we're safer there than we are, back home, refusing to do what he told us to do.
John, you've heard me share, and it's been in my prayers openly for a dozen years now, which is that I can live a life that's so bold and transparent that others would desire to know Christ through me. Your prayer life. Describe a little bit about what your prayer life is like, and then who do you lean in on relationally to speak into your life? Who's a sounding board? You had a strategic and a very significant mentor early on. Kind of touch on prayer life, mentorship, and who are the voices that encouraged you to be bold and kind of go for it?
Yeah, the beautiful thing I think we learned early on in Big Life is just the total dependency on the Lord and total dependency on prayer and communication with the Lord. The first person we ever hired to be a staff member with Big Life was our director of prayer. And to see him get people excited, thousands of people excited, lifting up this ministry every day. My prayer life, I'm sure like everybody's, it ebbs and flows, but I think fasting and prayer have probably been the biggest impact in my life over the last 26 years. It's probably about 28, 30 years ago when I first realized that, fasting is a real thing. It's I think a lot of us always thought it was just something they did, in scripture, and that it didn't exist anymore, but just the impact that's had. And almost every major decision we've made with Big Life as far as strategy or next moves has been done through fasting. I've had some incredible mentors in my life, disciple makers. Chuck Colson was one of the early ones on that poured into me. And, Chuck's the one that people got involved. Kathy thought that this was something that the Lord called she and I to do and that nobody else would be interested. And I was actually having lunch with Chuck, and he looked at me and says, "You're sinning." And I'm like, "Chuck, we're all sinners." And he goes, "No, you're sinning with Big Life." And I was just totally blown away that he would say that. In my mind, I was thinking of all these selfish reasons why I didn't think I was sinning. And he just looked at me and said, "The Lord's moving here, and you're not letting people get involved, and that's a sin." And so that really opened up doors to start letting a lot more people get involved and seeing a lot more growth. Another mentor I had actually was one of my neighbors when I was living in Naples, and that's Eddie Waxer. He was one of the original guys from Campus Crusade, and just an incredibly godly man, even every time I go back to Naples now, I always try to get together with him and spend time with him. T.M. Moore, who was Chuck Colson's theologian for 30 years, still pours into all the leadership staff here at Big Life, so these guys have mentored us. We're always trying to have people pour into us. So as we pour into others right behind us, that, they're getting that same benefit. Duckling discipleship, as long as we stay one step ahead of the person behind us, and we are disciple worthy of reproducing, then we're in pretty good shape.
Well, certainly, I think of discipleship as God pursued me. He didn't say, "Hey, I just want to be friends with you." He pursued me to be in relationship, and so taking that same approach to pursue others, to be in relationship with others, I know is your heart as well as I know it's certainly it's mine as well. John, you reached a point in your life where you sold your business and you said, "God, it's all of yours." You and Kathy, we're all in. You said all of our energy, our talent, our time, our resources, we're all in. For a couple that might be listening or an individual, they might be wrestling through, what does it mean all in? Describe kind of what that journey was like with you and Kathy when you said, "Lord, and we feel called to do this. We want to be fruitful for you. We want to glorify you. Our talent, our time, our resources, everything, it's all in." What was that experience like, and what was the emotion that you were going through when you were processing and thinking about that?
Looking back, it was an amazing experience. But at the time, it was really scary. And I think, when we decided to sell the business, my daughter was 3 and my son was 1. And again, having that mindset that Kathy and I thought that this is something the Lord told us to, and nobody else would get involved. We had no idea what that would really look like. So we used, all the funding from the sale of the business to support the ministry, start the ministry. You know, somehow the Lord provided. I mean, I think I went 7 or 8 years without a salary, but yet the Lord continued to provide in ways that we never imagined, and always at the right time. And if you're trying to look ahead, and you're at the very beginning, it looks so scary. But having experienced that, the peace and the joy of being put in a position where you really had to become totally dependent on Jesus is probably one of the greatest lessons we've ever learned in our life. Nothing is too big, nothing's too hard, and we put our trust in Him. I know that sounds churchy, but at the same time, it's true. It's probably been the greatest experience of our life. But if we had had all the answers and even ended up in the same place right now, the experience would have been totally different because we weren't having to trust Him. So it's been amazing just to see how He drew us closer together as He drew us closer to Him.
John, let's shift here to the landscape of the gospel and those that are desiring to know Christ globally. You mentioned all the countries and the areas of the world that there is a big life partnership, relationships, or people in the field. The epiphany, you and Gibson had an epiphany a number of years ago as it relates to just going about how you do ministry. And in one case, you had an experience in India that kind of really changed and reflected how you wanted to pursue indigenous and empowering the local leader. Share with us a little bit about that experience when you were in India and with the little boy that held your hand.
Yeah, actually, that was my very first trip to India, and I had no desire to go to India. Iran made sense to me, and after 9/11, we lost our visas to Iran, and I was really upset with the Lord, and we had this opportunity to get involved with Olympic baseball in India, and it's like, I really don't want anything to do. I said no 4 times, and then finally, I think my wife just said, "Why don't you go one time? We'll be done. Start over." And I went to India, and I'm embarrassed to say I just absolutely hated it. I went through the motions for 10 days and hated the experience. And on the very last night, they had this big press conference about baseball coming to India. And this reporter raised his hand and asked me if I was a Christian. And I said, yeah. And he came up to me afterwards and he says, "I'm going to pick you up and we're going to go to church tomorrow." I'm like, well, I'm leaving to go home tomorrow. And he goes, yeah, but all the international flights take off in the evening. I'll be at your hotel at 7:30 in the morning. Showed up in a rickshaw, and we were going through the streets of Calcutta in a rickshaw. We're going, and there's lots of churches in Calcutta. And I'd say, hey, we're going to this church. No, we're going to this one. No. I go, why aren't we going to any of these churches? And he said something that really shook me. He says, the West came in here and built these churches and tell us how to worship. And it's not the same here. And then we went to this, out in the slums outside of Calcutta, and, mud floor, thatch roof. And we walked into this church service, and I was totally disgusted. And I just wanted to come home. And I knew I'd never come back to India. And they started worshiping, and, they were worshiping in Bengali, and I didn't understand a word that they were saying. But suddenly the presence of the Lord became overwhelming. And then they started singing this song, and I could recognize the tune, even though they were singing in Bengali. It was Because He Lives, I Can Face Tomorrow. And I flashed back to just a few minutes earlier, standing there thinking, wow, these people really don't have anything. And I realized that they had everything. They had Jesus. And I started weeping uncontrollably, and I'm holding on to the chair in front of me just so I don't fall down. And my eyes are closed, and I got tears streaming down my face, and all of a sudden I feel these hands in my hands, and it's this little 6 or 7-year-old boy in very broken English. He looked at me and he says, it's okay, mister, he lives. And I lost it. And I promised the Lord right there that I'd come back at least one more time. And every time I went, I said, okay, Lord, this makes no sense to me. Iran makes sense to me. India makes no sense to me. Missionaries have been coming here for hundreds of years. I'll come back one more time. And each time I'd go over there, I'd argue with the Lord, this is the last time. And then every time on the way home, I go, wow, Lord, if you can do that, I'm in. And it never gets old watching the Lord do those things that only he can do. Transform lives, draw people to himself, and to see him do that where people embrace this relationship with him. I can't imagine doing anything else.
Yeah, pretty remarkable. It's a great reflection point how God really wants us to live out our own lives and our own faith and our boldness, and for others to know Christ as well, John. So thanks for the openness in that story. That was a game changer for you, I know. When you think about how receptive people are to knowing and wanting to know Christ, share with us, if you would, a little bit about what you're sensing globally, whether it be fulfill the Great Commission, complete the Great Commission. We're on this quest as believers to make sure that there's a healthy body of believers everywhere. Give us a sense of what's going on globally, that so many people are hungry to know who Christ is.
Yeah, I think, the most challenging places in the world are our fastest growing areas. Chaos leads to opportunity. And so, the tribal areas of Pakistan, tribal areas of Afghanistan, Iran, some other really difficult areas have always been our fastest growing areas. Because, like you take Pakistan and Afghanistan, home to all the extremists. They do things in such a extreme way. Like, they tell us now, they're followers of Jesus now, but they were Taliban before, they were extremists before. And they say, before we were willing to die for a lie. Now that we know truth, you can't stop us. And, even with more encouragement, more power, the sense of power that they feel, they go out into these most difficult areas, sharing truth. And then you see what the Lord's doing. In the Hindu world, we see so many times where the Lord will heal an unbeliever just to make sure that entire village basically comes running to him. Or in the Muslim world, we see it all the time. In fact, we partner with another ministry called Man in White Dreams, where the Muslim world, Muslims are having these dreams every night about the man in white. And, every time we go into a new area, people come running to us and say, hey, we had a dream. We were told that someone was going to come here and tell us about the man in white. This website, Man in White Dreams, that we partner with, they get so many hits right now of Muslims who are experiencing these dreams and want answers. Our main person in Pakistan is a former Al-Qaeda leader, fell out of bed reaching for Jesus in a dream. He said the Lord appeared to him 3 nights in a row. He says the third night I fell out of bed reaching for Jesus. And he's become the most incredible disciple maker I've ever seen in my life. So the Lord just continues to reveal himself in ways that, a lot of us in the West don't even fathom. But because of their dependency on him, because of the way the rest of the world seeks truth, the way they seek, who is God, I think, he keeps revealing himself in amazing ways over there. Where here, we still kind of consider ourselves God. We're totally dependent on ourselves. And we don't allow room for him to work sometimes in those ways that he works over there.
John, that Pakistani leader that you were describing, you've known him for a long time. I got to know him with a group a year and a half ago in Dubai. He said something that was pretty significant from his worldview to the Western worldview. Kind of share that, because that might be inspiring to those that are listening to this conversation today.
Yeah, it's actually one of the greatest lessons I've learned. He looked at Jeff Gibson and myself and said, you and I are different. And, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, former extremist, I'm sure, you killed a lot of people. I haven't. And he said, I read my Bible and I go do it. And I gain my understanding through my obedience. He goes, I trust that the Lord's going to teach me as I obey. He goes, in the West, it appears that everybody needs to understand it before they're willing to be obedient. Delayed obedience is disobedience. And it rocked our world. And now, even today, this is what the Bible says. We're going to go do it. And we're going to trust that the Lord's going to give us the understanding as we go.
John, my family motto, which you've heard me share, is we do our best and allow God to do the rest. And that's really my interpretation too, is that we just got to put ourselves out there. John, with everything you've got going on, you're head of a multi-million-dollar organization, and funding that comes in is only for the purpose of mission and ministry and to sharing the gospel, whether it be actually God's word, getting into Iran, other aspects of the ministry that's taking place. It's all about the movement and making sure that people are empowered and equipped to do the ministry at hand. What keeps you up at night, if anything? Do you sleep peacefully? Is there anything that keeps you up at night?
I don't think I've ever been able to sleep, but even before ministry, I think the things that keep me up, though, is, obviously the persecution is one of our biggest obstacles, but, our guys on the field ask us not to pray for the persecution to stop. Persecution brings opportunity, so they ask us to pray that they'll have the strength to endure the persecution when it comes. So that's always a big thing. There's so much chaos in the world, and then just trying to figure out how to use those chaotic opportunities to bring truth and bring the gospel in as lightness. And so just trying to realize new strategies. As things continue to change country to country. What would a new strategy be? And then I think the other thing is just our own backyard.
Mm-hmm.
We continue to run from the Lord here in the West. There's a lot of great things happening. There seems to be some revival going on in different areas now, and that's awesome news. But, it seems for the most part, though, our peers run away from Jesus. And, what would it take to see his name shouted from the rooftops everywhere in the world? And those are the strategies that we want to embrace and go after. So using each and every opportunity.
John, as you were sharing, a reflection for myself came to mind. About 20 plus years ago, Dallas Theological Seminary was looking to raise funds to cheer Professor Hendricks before he had passed away, Prof. And so I was working with DTS, and I said we could do $2.5 million raise in 3 settings. Anyway, it wasn't about the raise, it was about the conversation. The business group of leaders that was together in Atlanta, when we kicked off the first one, the leaders started talking about how do bad things, challenging things, business deals, family challenges, all the things in life that seem to be hitting us, that seem to be a challenge or an obstacle or difficulties. And Professor Hendricks said just loud enough, kind of putting a little bang on the table. He said, one day I was crossing campus and I saw Tommy. And I said, Tommy, how are you doing? And Tommy said, oh, Prof, everything is great. And he said, well, help me understand that. He said, marriage is great. Kids are in daycare. I've got money for next semester's tuition. Rent's paid. Everything is great. And Prof said, Tommy, that concerns me. And Tommy said, what do you mean? I told you everything was great. And Prof said, yeah, Satan doesn't consider you enough of a threat to be worried about you.
That's right.
So for those that are listening, man, when things happen to us, when we have obstacles and challenges, Satan's worried about us. John, how do you and Kathy pray through all the things that are hitting you? I know you well enough to know that you have a lot of things hitting you. As a good friend of mine in Southern California, we've been in hundreds of meetings together. And at the end of every meeting, the ministry leader always says, thank you so much for your prayers and your support. And he says, hey, I've got the easy part. I'm a business guy. I know how to make money. Thank you for being out on the front lines. And John, you and I have met with him before, but thank you for being out on the front lines. And how do you and Kathy work through and pray through the obstacles that hit you?
Yeah, I think for Kathy and I and really everybody with Big Life from the board on down now, you know, part of our initiation with anybody who gets involved with Big Life is saying, you know, you will experience spiritual warfare. And you will experience in ways that you've never experienced it before. And it's going to be difficult, but that's also means that we're doing something right. And the enemy's upset. So let's expect it. And then just pray through that and fast through it. And so I think Kathy and I, you know, we've gotten to the point. I mean, you don't get used to it, but you know during those really difficult times that the Lord's doing something that's going to knock our socks off. And even recently, I mean, everybody in the office here seems to be experiencing some kind of warfare, but everybody also has that same mindset that, you know, it seems even darker right now, but that means that the Lord's about to do something really, really cool. And I can't wait to see what that's going to be. So,
John, I want to clarify one word that you used earlier. You used the word fax. And for those younger listeners that's an old text with paper. When you sent a fax to the Iranian Olympic Committee, that was an old-fashioned text with paper.
well,
John,
you know, two things I said. Fax, no, you know, nobody probably even remembers what a fax is anymore. But the other one for the younger generation, Chuck Colson, they probably won't have any idea who he is. But he was one of the godliest people I've ever met in my life, and obviously has a background that a lot of people wouldn't celebrate because I mean he had a checkered past in some ways, but just what a guy turned into this godly man. So.
Well, going from the Nixon administration to prison and finding a relationship with Christ in prison, it's quite a story. Maybe those that are listening might go pull up. You just have to ask Chuck Colson, and you get it right there. John, Big Life, what are some of the key strategic initiatives moving forward? We heard about the mission and its focus and where geographically in the world at the beginning. Really wanted those listening to hear your story, kind of the John Heerema behind the scenes that got you to where you are today. The mission is still full court press. What are some of the key initiatives and the opportunities? And there's some areas of the world that are very difficult, very, very difficult, but there's no fear. There's no concern. There's no hesitation. It's a boldness. Tell us a little bit about what's going on that we can be aware of, pray for, maybe lean in, get to know how we can be involved financially, perhaps. But what are those opportunities that you want to share or can share that kind of tie a bow on bringing the gospel everywhere?
Yeah, I think the first prayer request is we got a large team. In fact, some of them are leaving from our office today, but most of our leaders from the Middle East are all going to be meeting together in the Middle East for the next 10 days. So obviously there's a lot going on around the Middle East right now. So just be praying for those meetings to be fruitful. I think Big Life, you know, like most missions ministries, we run after every unreached, unengaged people group that we can find. And really press in on those. But recently we realized that from 1985 until today, the only strategy that has outpaced the global birth rate is the disciple-making movements and church planting movements. So even though there may be a country that's considered reach, and you know the websites all use either 2% or 3% Christians means it's reached. Even though there are countries that are considered reached, there are areas within those countries that there's no known movement. And so we're focusing on that. We identified 183 areas about 2 years ago where there was no known disciple-making movement, no known church planting movement. And our fear was that those areas in those countries would start going backwards, kind of like
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways the West has gone backwards, you
We,
know. And so we focused on that. So I think that number now is down to like 53 or 54 that we have left. So that's what we call special ops. We're just going in there looking for those areas and making sure that we can go in there, identify the Luke 10 people of peace, pour deeply into them, and see how the Lord uses them to reach that entire area. Another initiative that we're seeing amazing traction right now is working with the deaf. It's the largest unreached, unengaged people group in the world. And for the very first time, we're starting to see the deaf baptize the deaf. It was always, hearing baptizing the deaf. And we got areas in Africa right now where the deaf are baptizing the deaf. And actually the deaf are starting to baptize some of the people that can hear and listen. So seeing the Lord do some amazing things there. Again, embracing that Luke 10 person of peace strategy everywhere and pouring deeply into the few. We feel if we take care of the depth, the Lord's going to take care of the breadth. And so we're using his strategy, and his strategy is to pour deeply into the few. And so to see his name shout from the rooftops everywhere. We have, some humanitarian things that we do just because, we never considered ourselves a humanitarian organization, and then COVID hit, and we had an opportunity to get some food in the areas that people were starving to death, and we saw such openness to the gospel, and some of our largest movements happening because of that. That we've increased that, and Steve, as you know, with Afghanistan when it fell 5 years ago this month. The opportunity we had to relocate 55,000 Afghans, and just the openness to the truth and to the gospel because of those things. So just looking for every opportunity where we can share Christ and why we get to do those things. And, even with these 55,000 Afghans, a lot of them came to us and said, "Why did you help me? I'm Muslim." And he said, "Because we wanted you to know that there's people that care about you, and that, Jesus Christ cares about you. And we want to make sure that you're aware of that." And the openness that it gave us to start pouring into those that we helped rescue. Even though we're not a humanitarian organization, we saw how we could use that to open up doors that we never had before. And so I think those are some of the main initiatives. We have a few others, but just again, at the end of the day, we want to see his name shout from the rooftop in every corner of this planet.
John, I also know that there are thousands of requests for God's word globally as well. Multiples of thousands on a daily basis to the Persians, as well as the greater Middle East and areas that you've mentioned. God's word, there's a hunger for individuals to say, I know who Christ is. I'm in a discipleship relationship, but I want to be in God's word too. And I think that's a key initiative that a lot of people don't realize the Big Life is implementing and delivering on. John, we think about the Great Commission often as Americans as everywhere around the world, but it's America too. Let's touch on one, what's happening in America, and then how did the American church first see Big Life in this movement, and how has that changed over the last couple of years? Because at first it was like, whoa, wait a minute, we know how to do church in America, and Big Life and the team took an approach, and now the church in America is embracing the approach that Big Life has been able to have success and implement and see fruitful communities across the country.
Yeah, so we, I guess, several years ago, we realized that the darkest areas of the world, tribal areas, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Taliban, Al-Qaeda, whatever, we saw incredible movement towards Jesus. And we saw our own backyard running away from Jesus. And really got to the point where we realized that we were being disobedient because, missions isn't something that starts when you get off an airplane. It's a lifestyle. We wake up every morning. We should be, already on mission to see our family members and our coworkers and those around us know Jesus. So if it's a lifestyle, then we have to be doing it every single day in our own backyard. And so we started working here in North America, and we had a lot of churches that were partnering with us because they loved the idea of being a part of the work that was going on in some really dangerous places. But as soon as we said that we're going to do it here, they said, you don't need to do that. You need to just bring people to our church. And, we kindly replied that, that would be good for some of the people, but that's not discipleship. And, that there may be a lot of people who don't want to step foot on a large mega church campus or a very small rural building. And we lost every church partnership. They all thought that we were going to try to steal people from their church, and we kept on telling them that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to get into the harvest, and find people the Lord's already stirring in. We've never been into a village anywhere in the world before the Lord. He's already been there stirring in somebody, and we can expect that same thing to happen here. And I think over years, I think it took maybe 6, 7, 8 years before a lot of the local churches here started to embrace that and realize that we weren't a threat. We weren't trying to take people out of their church or get them out of their pews. All we want to do is see people have an opportunity to get into the harvest and see people running to him. And even as their church members, how much healthier would they be as a church? How much stronger would these believers be if they're doing it themselves in their own backyard? And to have that opportunity. But they're also realizing that today, a lot of those people aren't going to walk into the church building. So they have to be okay with that. If they're having a relationship with Jesus and they're being discipled and they have a stirring in their heart to see others discipled, that's, at the end of the day, that's what we all want, right? So.
Well, John, and many of those church relationships have come back and they're supporting Big Life and the efforts with prayer and financial support, which is a blessing. As I shared earlier in this call, and I do mean this sincerely, to our relationship, but also seeing how you are with others. God desires to be in relationship with me. He's pursued an interest in my heart, my interest, and that's given me the ability to want to pursue, to get to know others. You implement that as well. You live that out. You truly do seek other people's hearts and interests. And that is really the secret sauce and the ethos of Big Life and the culture, is that it's all about relationships. It's about getting to know people regardless of where someone is culturally or their beliefs. It's that pursuit to get to know their hearts, to live a life that's authentic.
Yep. And to do it and be able to co-labor with others. Jesus' name is the only one that deserves to be shouted from the rooftop. No. Doesn't matter about Big Life, doesn't matter about the names of other ministries. Let's just co-labor together as long as his name is the one that's being proclaimed. And I think that also brings the Lord greatest honor, that we're all willing to put away our egos and our logos and whatever and work together to see him lifted up. And I think that's probably the most exciting thing about ministry, maybe the last 7 or 8 years, is how many ministries now are becoming like-minded and don't actually care about the name of their ministry. And that's been a really cool thing to see.
John, thank you for living a life that's so bold and transparent that others would desire to know Christ through you. I know that's my heart as well. Great being on this mission and this journey with you. And I appreciate you being on the Doing Good Better podcast today. So thanks for your friendship and all that we get to do together. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. And yeah, man, it never gets old running with you. So I love you. Well,
one thing that I know for sure is that we're all one relationship removed through Christ.
And that's right.
That's right. Awesome. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Wow, that was an incredible conversation today with John. What an amazing guy. I'm certain that you enjoyed the depth of the conversation, getting a snapshot and a look at John and Kathy's life behind the scenes that led to the launch and the mission and the ministry of Big Life. To learn more about Big Life, reach out to John Heerema. Go to the website at Big Life. Just Google it, pull it up. They have some great initiatives, and I know that you'll enjoy wanting to learn more about what they do and perhaps get involved and help be a part of their ministry team. All right, thank you so much. Thank you for being a part of this journey and this mission into Doing Good Better.